All right, hello. It is Miss Kepley here, and today we are going to talk about plot. So, all plot is a sequence of events in a story. So, like I said, plot is the structure or organization of the events in a story. And I like to think of it as a road map. It gets you from point A to point B in your story. So basically, if you think about it, it's what happens in the story. So what is a plot structure? So when we talk about plot structure of a story, we're talking about the beginning, middle, and end. And typically it's made up of 5 parts, and one event leads to the other. Now I have a little diagram that might look familiar to you. This is a plot diagram. It has the beginning, the exposition, the rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Now I have several steps in there because so it's not just one rising action event usually. It's a couple that lead up to the climax and a couple of falling actions. And even in like great stories, we'll have many plot diagrams throughout the whole thing. So let's look at what each section means. So first we're going to look at exposition, and that is just a fancy way to say the beginning of a story. It's the start. And what happens in the beginning of the story? Well, the characters and setting are introduced. Like the author doesn't just plop you down in the middle of a story without telling you where you are or who is involved. We have to know those things so we start to get invested. And it helps give meaning to the actions that will take place later in the story. So it's laying the groundwork. Exposition's all about getting you familiar with the people and the places. Next, we have rising action. And rising action are the events leading up to the turning point. This is where the conflicts start to develop, that tension comes up, there's obstacles and problems that are introduced that stand in the way of the character reaching their goal. And this all leads up to what we call the climax. Climax is also the turning point of the story. It's a pivotal moment where typically you're like, what's going to happen? Oh my goodness, is the character going to go choose one path or another path? What is going to happen? And it's typically intense. And usually because of the climax, the main character is changed some way. And that can be changed for the positive or the negative. That's up to you as the reader to determine. And then after the climax, we have the falling action. And this is what happens after the main problem of the story has been solved. It's the direct effects of the climax. And it satisfies that the reader's desire to know what happens. So we don't just end where the character changes. We have to think, how does that affect everybody around them? How does that affect them internally? How does it affect this story as a whole? So this part of the book is necessary because it satisfies those questions that you have as a reader. And we learn a lot about the character and theme in this part of the story. And finally, we have the resolution. And the resolution is the point that the conflict has been resolved and the story has reached the end. And to me, I like to think of it as tying up any loose ends that might be left in the story. And everything is resolved and the story comes to a reasonable ending. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a happily ever after, but the conflict has been resolved at the end. Unless you're reading one of those books that's like a cliffhanger and you're like, oh, I gotta read the next one to figure out how it's resolved. But typically, they're resolved. So let's discuss, why do we even talk about plot? What's the big deal? Why is it important to have a plot structure in a novel or a short story? So what I want you to do, if you are by yourself, you can pause the video and write down some quick notes about why you think it's important to have plot structure. If you're with some friends or in the classroom, just pause and turn and talk. Let's take about 3 minutes and let's talk about why is it important to have a plot structure. So what did you come up with? For me, I think it's important because plot gives your characters something to do. In addition, the story would be super boring if we didn't have that rising action and climax. And if we didn't have the exposition, we wouldn't be invested in the characters. So every part plays a role in keeping the reader engaged in the story. So that's why we have plot. All right, so now, here is a practice if you would like to review your terms: exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. You can click over to this quizzes and take a couple of minutes and practice these vocabulary terms. If you would like extra practice, there are links in the description below to some activities to help you or your students start to understand plot. There's a short story, and then there's some activities where you pull out the different plot elements. Also, I'm trying to think, there's some other great stuff linked in the description below. Just click it, check it out. I think it will be super helpful if you are an ELA teacher. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day. Thanks for joining us on this plot exploration, and I will talk to you later.